The idea behind a pack-in game is a simple one. Show off a console and make sure that buyers can get a sample of the power and potential of their very new and very expensive purchase. When done right, a pack-in game can launch a system into the stratosphere and create a new successful franchise. As time went on, the pack-in game changed. In some cases, it completely disappeared. Other times, new systems would have customized pack-in games that also came with additional collateral material like designs or controllers. That being said, pack-in games were, in some ways, like a first impression. You only got one shot to really show off how a pack-in game worked. I want to talk about the pack-in game, what they were, why they were so popular, and why they stopped. The goal of a pack-in game was often multifaceted. I'd argue that the most important benefit of such a game was to show off the system. So let's start with the first systems, all of which had pack-ins. The Fairchild Channel F, literally one of the first consoles in the market, created games that actually had detachable cartridges, as opposed to games that were built into the system. Despite that, the pack-in games for the system were both integrated within the system itself. As one of the first home consoles ever sold, the Fairchild Channel F had a unique obligation. It had to show off the capabilities of this new device while also hitching into what was popular at the time. And what was popular and well known in 1976 when the Channel F was sold? Pong. That probably explains a lot about why tennis and hockey were pack-in games. They were basically advanced Pong clones. That, in turn, made marketing the system easier. The first version of the Atari 2600, the first truly commercially successful home console system, came with combat in a fully boxed form. In the game, you controlled a tank and fought to hit other players. There were dozens of variations on the game, but that was the core mechanic. This pack-in game achieved quite a few things. Chief among them, Tank was social. The game only had a two-player mode, meaning that you had to play with friends. Other games for Atari did have a one-player mode, so the system sort of pulled you into a social setting where you and your friend would play, and then the other friend would turn to their parents and say, "I want that too." It was kind of brilliant. The variations within the game, which included tank pong, biplane, and jet, added replayability and creativity to the game. It was tough to get bored, particularly in 1977 when the game first premiered. This innovation helped to highlight Tank's potential. It seems worth noting that a later version of the Atari 2600, released in 1982, used Pac-Man as the pack-in game. But not this Pac-Man, this one. While the game sold well, thanks in part to its pack-in status, it was panned by critics as being a cheap replica of the arcade game. For many reasons, some not fair, but that's the reality, this game was a disaster, and it may have contributed to the video game crash of 1983. Then you have systems that went in a wildly different direction, like the Intellivision. This system was released by Mattel in 1979. Instead of opting to a pack-in adventure game like the Telstar Arcade or Odyssey 2 did, the Intellivision went with Las Vegas poker and blackjack. This was a choice. The game did not appeal to a wider audience and certainly could not be considered to be child-friendly, particularly given that the year was 1979 and parents weren't really about letting their kids play gambling games. As the game implies, players would play against the computer, betting an imaginary pot of money while they played poker or blackjack. The sound was cool, and the dealer looks really sketchy. According to the website Blue Sky Rangers, the pack-in status of the game meant that it moved more than 1.9 million copies. As soon as Intellivision began to use Astro Smash, a game that, makes a lot more sense, sales of Las Vegas poker and blackjack fell off a cliff, and only another 2,500 units were sold. So, why the heck was this the game that Intellivision went with? Well, it goes back to the goal of the system itself. Let's turn to Wikipedia. Quote, most of the early games were based on traditional real-world concepts such as sports, with an emphasis on realism and depth of play within the technology of the game. The Intellivision was not marketed as a toy. Ooh. Well, in that case, this selection makes perfect sense. The Intellivision never wanted to be a toy. It wanted to be more mature and realistic. This leads me to what I would argue is the second goal of a pack-in game. At its core, pack-in games were use cases. They were meant to show off the system's capabilities and give players a better idea of what sort of purchase they had made. Need any proof? Consider Wii Sports. YouTube tells me that the vast amount of my viewers were alive when the Wii came out, so I'll take a moment to remind you of this particular insanity, because it was nuts. The Wii was so revolutionary and impossible to find, stalked by perpetual system shortages for years. Ultimately, the Wii was the seventh best selling system of all time, moving more than 101 million units worldwide. Despite the fact that other systems from the era were moving in a direction away from pack in games, including the PS2, PS3, and Xbox, the Wii decided to include Wii Sports. This was a brilliant and sensible move. Before individuals purchased any other Wii game, odds were good that they had used Wii Sports to tool around with the brand new and cutting edge control system. The game was basic enough to be educational, but innovative enough to capture your attention. It consisted of a series of mini games, including boxing, golf, tennis, bowling, and baseball, that literally came as tutorials to ensure users knew what they were doing. It gave you a chance to set up the system and practice the new motion controlled games. It also hurt your arm. I 1000% remember having what we called Wii arm when my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, first played Wii tennis with me. Nintendo leaned in heavily to this pack-in game, using it in their marketing campaigns, and I think the reason why is obvious. It was easy to grasp and a perfect demonstration of what the Wii could do and how players could enjoy it. The game didn't emphasize graphics, but instead emphasized replayability and system capacity. Commentators credited the game with helping to make the Wii as popular as it was. At the same time, the game encouraged players to get more exercise and helped bring non traditional populations, including women and the elderly, into the game playing market. In some cases, pack in games could also show off improvements or accessories for a system. Remember, there's nothing that says a pack in game can't change over time, and as systems improved, so did the game. For example, Nintendo had at least 8 different pack in games, including Super Mario Bros., Tetris, Duck Hunt, and more. The Sega Master System, that was the console before the Genesis, had 4 games, including Missile Defense 3D and Hang On. And the Sega Saturn? They have about a dozen different pack in games, including Vatlava? What the hell is Vatlava? Whatever. Keep in mind that the pack-in game was often meant as an entree into the gaming world. Let's talk about the Nintendo for a second, and specifically the r.o.b. The first Nintendo sold came with this guy, the Robotic Operating Buddy. It was sold with 2 games, Gyromite, one of Nintendo's first pack-in games, and Stack Up. Nintendo marketed the device as the world's, quote, only interactive robot, end quote. Now, what's interesting is the why. Unless you were around in 1986 or already know a good amount about Nintendo's history, you may never have seen the r.o.b. So, why does this thing exist? Well, Nintendo was one of the first major home console releases after the video game crash of '83. As part of an effort to differentiate their positioning within the marketplace and to alleviate the fears of retailers, Nintendo came up with the r.o.b. It could be used interactively based off of the game you were playing. The r.o.b. worked as a fancy controller. The purpose of the r.o.b. was simple: get Nintendo's foot in the door and market the system as more than just a home console. When done right, pack-in games also launched franchises. In fact, that's what the best pack-in games were: flagship games. And 3 games served this exact purpose. First, of course, there's Super Mario Bros., the first pack-in game Nintendo ever sold. Originally referred to as a, quote, athletic game, end quote, by developer and creator Shigeru Miyamoto, Miyamoto designed Super Mario Bros. With the idea of creating a side-scrolling adventure that could highlight the Nintendo's capabilities. We can't discuss the Mario pack-in games without discussing the various iterations of the game. There was the Nintendo Action Set, which also came with a Duck Hunt Mario Duel cartridge, as well as the Power Set, which came with these games and World Class Track Meet. These games also came with additional accessories like the Zapper Gun and Trackpad. While we're on the subject, I think it's interesting to discuss why pack-in games failed and how they sometimes made way for more popular franchises. Sonic changed the fortunes of the Sega and made them much more popular. Sonic first became popular thanks to an aggressive marketing campaign, and the fact that it was the pack-in game for the Sega Genesis in 1991. Prior to that, Sega hadn't used Sonic. Its pack-in game was Altered Beast. This was a single-player platforming game that saw you take the role of a main character and fight your way through a series of monsters. It wasn't a bad game, and for the time, the colors were sharp and the graphics were good. However, it lacked the charm, personality, and color of Sonic. The first Sonic game was released in '91 and sold as a pack-in game with that version of the Genesis. Its purpose was multifaceted. Sonic was designed to show off the capabilities of the Genesis. It was colorful and it was fast. Sonic was also meant to be edgier, which played into Sega's overall marketing campaign. Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Genesis wanted to be the system for grown-ups, while Nintendo was a kid's toy. Sonic and his supposed edgier attitude helped make that transition. Going back to the major franchises, there is Tetris and the Game Boy. Tetris is the best-selling franchise of all time, with its various iterations selling more than 520 million copies. And its success started on the Game Boy, where it was the original pack-in game in every region of the world except Japan. Tetris's success helped ensure that the Game Boy became one of the best-selling systems of all time. It also significantly expanded the popularity of the Game Boy and helped it become more popular with non-traditional video game players. All of this leads back to what I think is the most interesting question. Why did the pack-in game go away? Since the late 90s, pack-in games have been sporadic at best, and extremely rare since Wii Sports in 2006. The PS5 did break the mold with the release of Astro's Playroom, which was meant to show off the haptic feedback of the PS5 DualSense controllers. The game gives you different vibrations for various surfaces, and close attention to the feedback is required to complete some game elements. The question recurs, why are pack-in games now gone? So let's start by giving manufacturers a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. In all fairness, pack-in games are a bit of a relic. So again, the purpose of pack-in games, to show off a system's potential, to demystify a console, or to launch a new franchise. Most, if not all of that, can be done before a single game is ever manufactured, thanks to the internet and our good buddy YouTube. The world of marketing is now flat. Every one of us can just reach into our pocket and pull out information on a game, system, or console. We don't need the extra enticement that a pack-in game would offer because we already have it. Of course, the world isn't free from greed, and if the past few decades have shown us anything, it's that video game companies will squeeze us like we're lemons, milking every last cent from our cold, dead hands as part of their efforts to improve their bottom lines. DLC and microtransactions now reign supreme in most cases. Yes, I'm looking at you, horse armor from Skyrim. So when given the chance to save money on a game and force customers to make an additional purchase, video game companies jumped. Now, that is not to say that video game consoles completely stopped being sold as part of an effort to sell new games and package the two together. Over the past 2 decades, there have been a nearly endless plethora of special edition consoles, with these limited edition consoles often coming with different physical features, varying accessories, and a special pack-in game. They would often come with Blu-ray discs, additional content, DVDs, figurines, or more. Of course, in most cases, these systems cost more than the base system itself, like a lot more. So, pack-in games were no longer a freebie. They were just part of an effort designed to make you spend more cash. I mean, in all fairness, these customized designs had to cost at least $2.50 a machine, so that justifies a 33% markup. Look, pack-in games were the best. They were charming, they built excitement for a system, and they enabled players to get to know a flagship series with purchase. They felt special, like you were getting something for free, and when done right, they built brand loyalty with a system. Unfortunately, at some point, the big guys figured they didn't need pack-in games anymore, except in the cases when they absolutely did. I hope that the benefits of pack-in games are seen again in the future, but if not, there's still hope for exploring new games. The internet has flattened the playing field and made it easier than ever to find out about a system, learn tutorials, discover games, and learn about genres that may fit your interest. The distributed digital systems we know and love, including online stores and platforms like Steam, are bringing new and affordable games closer than ever to the customer. To be fair, the model that necessitated a pack-in game has largely come and gone, but I still miss that first new box. That's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, like and subscribe, and have a wonderful day out there.